Hello, everybody. So today I'm going to talk about how architects and consultants should think about addressing the problem and the need for this solution. So as you think about if you have experience in the OT and ICS environment, we're going to tell you why Microsoft and what Microsoft's doing about that. But if you know more about Microsoft and you haven't touched OT and ICS before, we're going to explain that too. So we're trying to cover both fields here. Again, we are live, so ask questions as we go along. I'll try to answer them if I see them, and if not, we'll come to them at the end of the session. So Gartner defines the operational technology in the following way. It really is about the people and the processes as well as the technology that actually runs critical infrastructure, but we're seeing more and more critical infrastructure can be groceries and toilet paper. So really anything that helps us live a normal everyday life, some of them can be life-saving and some of them can just be an inconvenience. Either way, we don't want the comfort and safety of life to have to change, and so we need to protect them more than they have done in the past. The reason why we need to take notice of this and take advantage now, and the reason why Microsoft is really getting involved in this area, is that there's a huge challenge in the way that it's worked over the years. So in the past, things have been built in the industrial control systems or the operational technologies areas in an isolated manner. So they've had great segmented networks. You'll hear about them being completely isolated from the internet, or they're firewalled off, and you can't get to them. That used to be the case. And what we're finding, and customers are finding more and more, is either they've had to do some kind of remote access, either partners are helping to manage or third-party systems vendors are coming in and want to be able to do remote monitoring. Well, the company themselves are starting to take advantage of things like modern technologies and the cloud. As they start to add new things into their environment, they're adding modern devices and technologies into what we can call maybe a legacy type network. Didn't have the layers of security that IT might have. And so we end up with this IT-OT divide where the OT world is secure in itself and the experts in that field know what they're doing in that environment, but they're now starting to blend with the IT world, which we know has huge cyber attack surface. And the attackers are starting to take notice as well. As the IT space gets maybe harder to attack and harder to achieve and reach the breach they want to breach, they're going to start shifting more towards, I can now do ransomware against a factory or to your smart building controls. If you can swipe in and out in the morning every day or get into your server rooms because the digital controls we put in place prevent you from doing it, there's going to be a different kind of ransom going forwards. So it's important to do, and I'm going to give you a few examples in this scenarios to show you the kind of things that have happened so far, and there are plenty of more examples out there. We're also always listening to your feedback, so if you are an expert in this field, or as you start to integrate with your customers and talk to them about these problems, you're going to hear their feedback and their stories. Share them with the community, share them with us, let us address those and see how can we solve them. So one of the first ones I'll show you is about this one called the Strontium Group. And this is the idea of IT bleeding into, or IoT bleeding into the OT world. You may have heard of payment systems being attacked. This was a VoIP system, a voice over IP system. They were able to compromise these devices, unfortunately, default credentials. It used to be the same in your home networks, in your home Wi-Fi and routers. They would have just a standard user ID and password, and then that's now changed. Hopefully you'll find that some things are getting more secure by default. But there are already millions of devices out there that are using some kind of either weak or standard published user ID and password to get into. Once they break into that, they've got access to an operating system that's running on a network. From there, they can then elevate their attack. They can start enumerating admin groups, start to target their phishing emails potentially, start dumping software if they can into any kind of Linux or Windows machines that might accept them. And then from there, communicating in and out from the networks. And you could detect these, right? There's not just one way to solve this problem. You could detect the communication to the C2 server. You could detect the enumeration of the admin groups. And so some of the problems we're trying to solve for here have already been solved for in IT. But because this is not seen as an IT problem, it's an IoT or OT problem, some of the same solutions aren't being provided. The next one's an even better example of that one. This is an actual attack on the Ukraine grid, the electricity grid, right in the middle of winter as well. You can see this is the flow, and I'll break this down into the steps that they took to get through to this attack. So the first part is phishing. Very simple. We're all well aware of phishing attacks, and number one problem for most people, and they worry about, but from phishing, what happens if they get to credentials that is actually somebody in the OT world? Well, now they've got access into VPN, and yes, they still need to VPN to get into the systems, even though it's an isolated network. There's rules that allow them to have remote access, whether it's a jump box server, VPN credentials. The operators need to be able to get into those systems when they can't physically get to those sites. It could be a wind farm in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and you need a boat or a helicopter, and you have to climb up to the top to get to these machines. And so remote access is quite handy. The weak segmentation part, though, is, again, being able to attack something, being able to use devices and attack something in the IT world and allowing that to get through all the way through to an operational control point of view could be seen as weak segmentation. The lack of monitoring, that's what we're going to talk about today. You're going to see a lot of our monitoring activity to at least get the visibility and understand what's happening. And then you can see what your network hosts are doing in the IT and OT side, what are SCADA or SCADA, depending on which country and language you speak, it's SCADA or SCADA. You're going to see those hijacks, and also things like commands being sent to devices, which then carry out attacks, or firmware being updated. These are the things we're looking for on these networks. Your UPS shouldn't be disconnected from your network. That's a bad idea. And then we're going to see malicious activities, which some of those can be pattern-based and recognized, or it could just be like we do with Defender for Endpoint, looking for very specific or very unusual behavior and activities. This one resulted in people being without power in the middle of winter. That's a small attack, unfortunately. It could be worse. I'm not trying to do scare tactics. There's no need for that. I think the people that are running these systems know and understand well enough the problem they're facing. What they may not understand is just how vicious and fast these attackers can go. And we have seen it in the millions and billions of dollars in the corporate world. We just don't want them to get into this world. So here's another one. Here's the Triton attack. And if you've heard of any, you'll have heard of the Triton attack. This one, unfortunately, is against the safety system. So where the last one took out electricity, this one might end up in blowing something up. So the attack is actually from the corporate side again. You can see that there's this thing called the Purdue model, layers 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Everything in layer 3 and 4 is everything you may have known from the IT, enterprise IT side, everything internet connected, everything coming in from the outside world. That is your first attack point to get into OT. Unless you're physically walking on site, you're going to be coming across some kind of remote network. So what happens is the first thing they do is steal the OT credentials. Again, it could be phishing. It could just be it's a weak set of passwords. It could have been using the same password for their Facebook account that they use for their Works account. One way or another, they're able to get into this corporate workstation. From there, they're able to see that this workstation is actually allowed to get through to an engineering workstation, or the engineering workstation is online, has internet connectivity, and again, using the same credentials that other workstations might be using. From there, they can then get through to PLCs, programmable logic controllers, physical devices with logic inside them that then control sensors and actuators. If we think of an actuator opening and closing a valve or a door, releasing safety and pressure, making sure temperatures don't increase. The way they pick this up is the fact that this is actually against the safety system. So if they attack the safety system first, we now can't prevent things like pressure overloads. They are designing these networks with multiple layers of fault tolerance and redundancy and to prevent these things. But if you go attacking them and disable those safety rails, they're disabled. So we're going to see that we have access to see the port scanning. We're going to see that we've got some devices on there looking for trouble. That's not normal in these networks. We're going to see that there's a program update made. That might be normal, it might not, but we can now report on that and let the OT team know a firmware change was made or a switch setting was changed. We'll even go so far now as detecting the settings on those devices and say, this is a compromisable device because we can program it. Whereas other devices might have a physical key switch that says we can't program it. Detecting before the problem is obviously the best way to go. But sometimes you deploy these technologies and you find out the customer may already have a problem in their network. They already have viruses running around. So let's take a zero trust approach. This is merging different stories across Microsoft, like our identity story, our endpoint story, cloud and networking. This is the same for Defender for IoT. As you think about approaching the customer around the problems and the solutions for it, think about what that means to them, that maybe they're already compromised, and if not, one step away from it. So if we think on a very broad scale, if you haven't done zero trust before, take a look into it. Again, you don't have to go too deep into this to just do OT and IoT, but these are merging conversations that we can have. If we can protect those identities from being phished, from getting access to VPNs, the password controls, you're going to block most of the problems in the first place. After identities, then we're protecting devices. Don't let untrusted devices get through to networks that can then control systems. That's on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, the data about those systems is just as important as the systems themselves, because it would give the attacker advanced knowledge of what to attack and how to attack it. Otherwise, they're blind. They're going in and trying to discover as they go. So the less information they can get access to, the better. So it's still a good, strong identity data governance problem to worry about. Once we get down to things like apps and infrastructure and networks, that's where everything changes. This world is very different. You can't patch these systems all the time. You can't always mitigate it 100%. So taking that zero trust recommendations, we want to make sure you put the verifications in, make sure there's least privileged access, have step-up authentications to make sure that they don't always have 24/7 access into the OT world without going through some kind of breaker controls and say, can I have the keys to the kingdom before I can go in there and do that? Assume compromise, obviously, basic hygiene. If they can be patched, let's tell them about the patches that are available. Many of the problems are going to be from patches that were made available 2 or 3 years ago. As long as the manufacturer and the warranty allows, they can and should patch on the right ways. If they can't patch, because sometimes these systems don't have patches available because the company didn't either know about the problem that they had or they knew about it, but they didn't release a patch. That happens as well. So this is where you have to obviously train employees, make sure they're aware of the security problems that are coming, implement the monitoring, detect unauthorized devices on those networks and behavioral anomalies, which is when we're going to add in things like Azure Sentinel and start to look at pattern recognition, and implementing micro-segmentation if they don't have it already. Again, if you think of something like a ship or a submarine, that's not just one big network, or it shouldn't be just one big network. There should be the people that are on the ship running the systems, there's your personal internet access, there's guidance. They should all be completely separate from each other. And then unifying IT and OT, this is going to be the real challenge. When you approach a customer with this problem, one, if they don't know about Microsoft and our scales and technologies, you're going to have to look at convincing them that we have real power here. If they do know it, that might be in the IT side, not the OT side, different budgets, different technologies. The least that we could do is try to bring some of the threat understanding and knowledge and the scanning, the capabilities to detect things together and start getting them to talk to each other. You might find in some companies that's still an issue today, where they don't talk to each other and share those threat signals. So the way this works, I'm going to lead this in, I'm going to show you how the architecture works, understand what it's all about, and then Paul's going to come in and actually show this working. He's going to get on the hands-on demos and show you how to get this working in your labs, and we thoroughly encourage you to get this working in your environment. We can help you do that with a very little or to no cost. As Frank said, we are covering all the time partners to be able to enable this in your lab environments without it having to cost a fortune. So the first thing that you want to understand about this is that we can do the discovery. This asset discovery is one of the first steps that's going to give value to the customer. So if you're looking for a quick win on any customer, let's do an assessment. Let's understand what's happening. Let's make sure that we understand what the network looks like. How many devices do you have? What kind of issues might be on there? And then we can go into showing them a map of all their assets. The next step that's going to help us then do is look at that map and understand that sometimes these devices only have one pathway. Now, they're designed generally with 2 pathways for everything. So you have the fault tolerance that if a network switch or a cable or something went down, a signal could still be received from a different path. You may find that by doing this network discovery, you'd run this for maybe 2 or 3 days, capture a PCAP file, ingest it, and you'd see in 3 days, this one device only talks to one other device. It only has one pathway, and all my other devices have 2 pathways. So that's an immediate operational problem that you could go to the customer and understand. You might want to have a look at this and see if your network's set up properly. You're not going to tell them how to do their job. You're just giving them information they might not have had before. The next one is with that information, and even just in the sense of running on your laptop offline, no cloud connectivity, no licenses paid, you could run a risk and vulnerability management system for them to just show them again a snapshot of their environment. What is the problem? What is the potential problems? Does something have internet access, and from the internet I can get all the way down to a PLC? And if so, you can then talk about the risks, the vulnerabilities of do you have MFA and VPN, and what if your VPN is compromised? That's happening a lot more these days. When we get to the stage where they understand the risks and the potential benefit of the solution, we move into deploying a sensor into their network. This requires you to actually attach to their network, so there's going to be some change management required. It's either a tap or a span port into the switch so we can listen to all the broadcast traffic. Once we're at that stage, we can now do continuous monitoring. We can do the detections. We can send alerts either to their existing SIM or send it up to Azure Sentinel, and from Azure Sentinel forward it on to anywhere else they want to do. Maybe they use Azure Sentinel and that's all they need. Unified IoT, OT security monitoring is going to be that whole, now we have the signals available and we can send them anywhere and do anything we want with them. Who should they go to? And who's going to look at this information? Who's going to respond and react? This opens up an opportunity for our partners to build and manage services around Defender for IoT. There's more than just this OT world. As we said, there's IoT, there's medical devices, smart vehicles, smart buildings. There's more building in the future. So the breadth of audience is growing all the time. But the immediate need in the industry really is the IT OT side. Okay, how does it work? Let's get to this diagram. This is my last slide because we don't always like slides, but it's a pretty diagram and I like this one. Mark Simons is going to be on later and he had an original version of this and I just took it and kind of cut it down a little bit and changed it. What this helps us do is set the scenario that this is very much manufacturing and control systems on plant, if you like, industrial control systems, but you can modify this slightly for any customer depending on what their operational technology might look like. It could be retail, it could be logistics, smart buildings, whatever's on the left-hand side is their specific environment that is not your general desktop PCs and servers and iPhones. So there's a divide between them. Sometimes it's a hard divide. There isn't even a network cable or Wi-Fi joining the two together, in which case we can deploy just in that environment. With or without segmentation, you can deploy a sensor into this network and just run the sensor only on its own. So all the logic and understanding is in there. We enhance it with the cloud if we can get to the cloud, but if not, remember that this can be done just offline. The first step, as I said, is a PCAP file. So if you can encourage a customer to run a PCAP capture in their network, maybe in multiple network segments, what you're going to be able to do is help them ingest, well, you're going to ingest that into your sensor. They don't have to set anything up. They don't have to go and sign up for Azure. You can capture the PCAP files, and in a meeting, within 10 minutes, you can run through it and show them what you see. It's very impactful to be able to do that. Once we get to the point where we can actually deploy the sensors, this can be a physical machine. We've got a list of available options on our website that you can buy through our partner Arrow, or the customer might choose to use their own hardware, in which case we'll work with you as the partner to validate that it's actually going to work on their systems, drivers, etc. If not, run it as a virtual machine. Download the ISO image, install it as a virtual machine, and then it can run on anything. Next phase is we'll get a container option coming, so it can run on a wider range of systems as well. One of the NICs is going to connect into that tap or span. It's going to receive the broadcast traffic and it's going to listen to everything that happens on that network. And this is where we have zero impact on their network. We can't touch any of the devices. We're not going to break anything. Some of them are very sensitive. So the customer will be very sensitive to any changes or modifications or additions to their network. You can hopefully lay their worries to rest. By only tapping into the span port or a tap port, you're only listening only. You can't have an impact. All the data comes in, the sensor does all of its analytics, the security updates are done. At the moment, it's about once a month, but once this is a cloud connected sensor and you connect it straight to Azure, as soon as we have updates, we'll send them down to the systems. And same with things like we're looking at password management and asset inventory and updates to the operating system can all be managed from the cloud. If the customer doesn't want to touch the cloud, that's okay. If they are going to stay on-prem, they're not going to touch cloud, no internet access in or out, or sometimes it's only one way where they'll allow outbound, but they won't allow inbound. We can still deploy just within their isolated network if they want to. Again, think of a ship or a system that doesn't have internet access on a regular basis. They might just want to have that as a self-contained system. So our IoT manager is the one that actually manages multiple sensors. If you only have one sensor, you don't need a manager. But if you have 4 or 5 sensors, it's a bit hard to manage them individually. So the manager is then built to help make that a bit simpler for the operators. That can connect to a local SIM if you want to. We have all the connections there. It doesn't have to be a pure Microsoft solution this time round. But where we want you to go is really encourage the customer to deploy the sensors and connect it straight to the cloud. When we do that, you'll see that some deployments can be 15 to 20 sites around the world. As soon as those VMs or hardware are installed and running, you're going to get the analytics coming in straight away. So you could deploy this solution to a customer within days or weeks. It doesn't have to take months to get this running. In fact, it could be hours. It's all as fast as you can deploy virtual machines. Once connected to the cloud, we're receiving all that data. For now, today, as we talk on this call, it's all about bringing that signal into Azure Sentinel so we can do additional analysis on it. Our threat teams, such as Section 52, Mystic team, and our Dart team that's out in the field responding to threats in these worlds, are adding analytics all the time. Some of that will get down to the IoT sensor. Some of it will be in Azure Sentinel. And then you as a partner can do your own brilliant logic to look at the detections and understand advanced threats and tie that in with the identity, the networks, and the IT side. Next, we're going to talk about what can we do to actually protect, because this is all about detection and defense in the way that we want to see what's happening. What happens next is there is an option or an opportunity to extend your offering to the customer to things like Defender for Endpoint and anything else in the Defender suite, because there is an IT environment to protect. So if you're talking about this attacks are coming in from phishing emails, you want to protect email. If it's identity, you want to look at Azure AD. But Defender for Endpoint can also be deployed in that operational environment. Now, we said we don't touch their networks. We're not going to install anything or patch anything. But there are Windows machines and Linux machines running in these OT environments just like IT. So there are domain controllers, web servers, file servers, lots of things that might be compromised. And the operator's consoles are generally Windows PCs. If they're running a supportable version of the operating system, we can use Defender for Endpoint to protect those systems. And you can suggest that there would be maybe a different patching schedule. So you wouldn't patch them on a Tuesday night just because there's the latest patches out. You would do it on a semi-automated basis that OT world will be on a slightly different cadence maybe than IT world, but you have the ability to patch as fast as you need to or wait until the right opportunity to do it. The other area to think about in this is this business analytics sensors. As I said before, there's a push in the industry to get them to become more modernized, and so it might be they need vibration sensors or temperature sensors, and these are modern devices connected to the cloud, bringing in telemetry to help with things like operational efficiency or my favorite one is also doing things like predictive maintenance, knowing that your devices are either going to break sooner than you expected them to, or they've got a bit more life inside of them, can change the way that you manage your maintenance schedules depending on what kind of resources you have. This is driving their bottom line, and that's going to push them to deploy more of these analytics, which is going to push them to need more security in these systems. So think about that, and if you and your organization has the ability to both work on the analytics side and we head to things like the digital twins, the ability to actually physically take a physical building and turn it into a virtual building and have all the telemetry around it, again, that is something you can push along with security at the same time. And then the last part is thinking about these response actions. So we're building a platform here, as Microsoft likes to do. It's not always about our sensor or our SIM technology. It's about all of it put together with partner and third-party solutions where the customer's already deployed firewalls and other defenses. So you can use Azure Sentinel or any other technology that they've chosen or you've chosen to use to help automate the response actions back. So if we've detected something like a malicious email, compromised identities, compromised the device, and now they're getting through the VPN, see all that attack activity happen in a pathway, you can respond through the VPN or the firewall or the identity system and lock that user account out while you do an investigation to ensure it's not malicious. Before they can get any further down the path into that OT world, if you go back to the 3 scenarios we had before, many of those were from the IT side infecting into the OT side. So that's it. I've used this diagram many times to try to explain this, and you can use this with your customers to explain it to them. We're always looking for feedback. I'll look at questions and answers if there's any. Tiffany's going to come in and ask me them. If not, we'll do it at the end of the day. But what I ask is that you go and get this deployed in your environment, get this running on a virtual machine. We can give you PCAP files, we can give you the sensors, we can give you access to run this stuff. And once you start to see it working, you can have really strong conversations with your customers about the visibility they need and the impact that you can have with them.